Yay, welcome. And wow. Well, the title of the talk today is called Look for the Best. Look for the Best. And I've taken it from a book that Lowell Fillmore, he's the oldest of the Fillmore boys, put together. And it's called The Prayer Way to Health, Wealth, and Happiness. And this is what it looks like. And if you have an interest in this, if you get on truthunity.net, truthunity, one word, .net, you can download a PDF of this for free. And you can have it on your computer, and everybody's got a computer here. Or if you put it on a little iPad, you can read it at night. And interesting that song that Lon chose, our last night I had the strangest dream. If we read spiritual stuff before we go to bed, we can have some pretty good dreams. About a week ago, I was reading this this book that Margie had recommended from her art class about the fall of the Byzantine Empire. And so I was reading that, and I had some of these violent dreams because these guys are taking castles and all this other stuff. So I shifted back to reading some spiritual stuff before bed. And so also, we are in Lent, and I think Unity Spiritual Center of Napa Valley may have sent you out some of the Lenten books. So I encourage you to, I've kind of been remiss, and I picked it up and started getting back into it. It's a great spiritual practice. And if you want something even more, our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, they put together this book, Keep a True Lent by Charles Fillmore. And it's got daily reflections. It's got Bible verses you can read. And it's also got another half section of the book on different Unity topics that you can do. And remember, Unity was originally spread by publications. And Lowell Fillmore, when he was a little shaver, he was involved in putting out the Unity magazine. And I think a month ago when Margie first spoke, she kind of gave a little pretty good comprehensive background of who Lowell Fillmore was. And yesterday I talked to Reverend Phil Pearson, who actually knew Lowell when he was back at the village. And I said, Phil, how would you describe Lowell Fillmore? And he says, well, he's been called Unity's unsung hero. I said, yeah. He says, well, Neil Volley, who's also done a trilogy of the Unity movement, Charles Fillmore, Myrtle Fillmore, really good scholarly research. He has a book on Lowell Fillmore, and he titled it Lowell Fillmore, Unity's Unsung Hero. And Margie and I met Neil Volley when we was working at the archives. He actually lived in Marin, but he spent a lot of time up in Tuolumne County. And when Margie's mom was back there, that's where they had their cabin. I think Margie's mom was there for my ordination. We ran into Neil up in the archives, and boy, he was all happy to hear about Tuolumne County and Margie's mom. But he's done some wonderful work on this material for Unity, Charles, Myrtle, and Lowell. So you want to check that out. And also, Phil mentioned that Lowell was a vegetarian. And I often wondered about the Fillmore boys. And he shared a story that his wife Dorothy was introducing Lowell at some big function back there at the village. And Lowell stood up and said, I haven't had a piece of meat in 30 years. Well, his younger brother, Rick, was in the background and kind of like a stage voice says, I haven't had any meat since breakfast. So not all the Fillmore boys followed in their mom and dad's footsteps of being vegetarian. But Lowell Fillmore was a pretty important guy in our Unity movement. He actually was the president and administrator of the Unity for years. He wrote for the Weekly Unity for almost 50 years. And he had the idea of what they called prosperity banks. These were little cardboard banks that they would send out to people that they could drop coins in to, one, remind them that they were in fact prosperous because they had money to put in there, but also if they wanted to buy Unity publications, which is the way the message was spread, that they could order them and keep the subscription up. So, and I really like this book. As a licensed teacher, I taught this as what was called a CEP class, an elective, continuing education class at my home church in Modesto. And when I was in ministerial school, I was the student minister up in St. Joe, Missouri. And that's kind of a story in itself too. But I chose that. And then when I'd have my classmates step in on the Sundays I couldn't speak, or Margie would all speak, I'd say, hey, pick something from a chapter from this book in Lowell and use that. So it kept them on track with unity messages at St. Joe. And it also gave my classmates practice in pulling stuff out of the book. So, wow. Well, several of the quotes that caught my attention are the emphasis for this message. And the first one is, everyone devotes a good deal of time to seeing with their mind's eye either the good things that he would like to attain or the unpleasant things he would like to avoid. His mind may flit about pleasantly for a time among good things and then dart into shadows of disturbing things. And once in a while, it may find itself spellbound by some possibility that terrifies it. Wow, that sure describes my mind. Now, I can flit about in the present things and then get into some of the negative things and get something that really terrifies me, and I can't get it out of there. It's like, we cannot not think. And even in my meditation practices, and I think in yours too, you don't blank out your mind, but you help control your thoughts. And there are sometimes in my meditation, stuff will just jump up there and just boom, 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 boom. The Buddhists call it monkey mind. You can't shut the darn thing off, but we can control it. We in meditation, we give our breath attention, we can give our body attention. And when we're out and about in the day, if we get these thoughts, we can direct those thoughts. So we can do, this friend of mine used to do cancel, or delete, like on the computer. If you make something error, you can delete. Those negative thoughts come in, go delete, or cancel. And then you can focus it on the good things. And one of the great paradoxes there, when stuff comes up in our meditation, comes up in our dreams, it may be something that we have to look at. This counselor buddy of mine, when he look at dreams and talk about dream interpretation, he'd say, Bob, what was the feeling that you had when you had that dream? So different things can mean different things to different people, and like if I dream of an oil tanker or something, it may be entirely different if you dream of an oil tanker, because I used to have to inspect the things and clean up the oil spills when the mess happened. So it may be entirely different for you. But if I have that dream about an oil tanker, it's like, what was I feeling at that time? Was I feeling happy and joyous because I had a good job I was doing, or was I happy or sad because maybe I had to be out there in the cold weather cleaning up these oil spills? So, but these feelings can come in many forms and strange images and snippets of information, recurring dreams. They sometimes rise up without reason. So it means that there's emotions that we need to feel. So we can take a look at that. What was I feeling when that thought come up, or state of my mind, or the dream, and then take a look at it. And sometimes our minds can just be sources of habit. I was laying in bed last night, and we're trying to relax, and we've just read some spiritual stuff, and all of a sudden I start talking about different things, and my Margie goes, sounds like my honey is running down the negative road. Maybe that's a habit of mine. I know when I was in ministerial school, they urged us to see an outside counselor to deal with this change process as we're going through in ministerial school. And I had this fellow named Dr. Jeff. He was in Overland Park, Kansas, and we hit it off pretty good. He was from Boston and stuff, and I'd be talking about stuff. He says, well, that little process in ministerial school is not really the greatest thing. And when I was in my schooling for psychiatry and stuff, this had this parallel here. And then one time he says, Bob, you have a catastrophizing mind. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you get in there and you start running down the road, and what's the worst thing that can happen? Margie and I get in an argument. Next thing you know, we're divorced. I'm out in the street. I'm penniless. It's like, oh my God, that's not going to happen. Well, we run or get something from the IRS. It may be an advertisement, and all of a sudden, oh my God, we're going to be audited. We're going to be broke. And we've been honest on our taxes all there, but want to run down this negative thing. And I think it's just a habit we have in our mind. And, in some ways that can serve you. When I was on active duty, I was assigned to revise the unit's COOP plan. That's continuity of operations plan. And what you have to do is sit down and say, what's the worst thing that can go wrong in our port area? With chips, with hazardous materials or oil spills or whatever, and how are we going to respond to it? So if you have a catastrophizing mind, you can be assigned to revise the COOP plan. And sometimes there's a COOP plan that we need to do in our life. What's the contingency of operation plan for our life? We may have to put that little catastrophizing mind on and say, okay, well, if this happens, what am I going to do? Do I need to do some preparedness for this? Well, again, Lowell writes, the pictures in our mind, whether they be pleasant, disturbing, or terrifying, are the charts for our future life course. We must learn to make our mental picture good, even when our present experience seems to be bad. We can do this by seeing God as spirit present in every situation, greater than the outer aspect of it. Wow. By seeing God, this is one of the ways on it we can get to see God in the small things. And, this morning I was doing my meditation, and of course it was pitch dark out there. I'm looking out for our New York Times and our Sacramento Bee. And I've had difficulty in this carrier delivering them. And I started running down the road of, oh my God, I got to call New York Times, I got to call Sacramento Bee. New York Times was a Christmas present for Margie. So now they're messing with the gift that I've given Margie. And I thought, why do I run down that negative? Or why can't I just imagine God, spirit, working through this guy, coming up in this car and using these flip motion and tossing the two papers right on our lawn. And probably, he had a little difficulty getting up with this time change too. And sure enough, I just let it go. And about 9 o'clock or so our time, the two papers were out there. But, I got rid of that negative stuff. And sometimes, if I'm looking for something in the house and I happen to find it, I'm saying, sorry, spirit, where is it? Boom, I look, there it is. And I choose to say, that is God active in my life. Help me find the checkbook or this little piece of tool that I somehow had lost and was right on the dining room table. So anyway, I've heard some stories and seen some practical application of what we tend to look at, we run into, or we bring into our life. This friend of mine was telling me about learning to ride a bicycle. And every time they looked at something like a telephone pole, they ran into a telephone pole. And I thought, oh my God. When I was taking horseback jumping lessons, the instructor said, look at the next jump. Don't look down. Look down, go down. And when I was a driver ed teacher, and after I got out of college, I was teaching behind the wheel classes in Carpentersville Senior High School, Illinois, Irving Crown Senior High School, Carpentersville, Illinois. And I remember turning down this one street, and I had this gal was driving, 3 kids in the back, and there's only one car parked on this entire suburban street. It's on the right side. And I said, okay, we got a parked vehicle over here, now let's be a little careful. And next thing I know, she is steering right towards the car. And I had to reach over and move the wheel. And I went, oh my God. I said, all right, what did I do here? I told her to look at it, and she drove right towards it. So, we tend to go where we look. So from then on, when I was going to trying these streets and there'd be a vehicle on the side or whatever, I'd say, look over at the other curb, keep your attention over there and keep the vehicle moving along towards that parallel to it. So, we tend to look where we're going. So look for the good, look for the good. And if we look for the good, we'll draw the good into our life. Another thing that Lowell had written is, my need is to fix my attention upon the omnipresence of God's goodness so that I will run into that heavenly condition. My need is to fix my attention upon the omnipresence of God's goodness so that I may run into that heavenly presence. So if we focus on God, we're going to run into God. I was reminded of this pamphlet. It's a Unity pamphlet that's put out by Unity. It's called The Golden Key. The Golden Key. And it was written by Emmett Fox back in 1931. And the one central thought of that is stop thinking about the difficulty, whatever it is, and think about God instead. Stop thinking about the difficulty, whatever it is, and think about God instead. You know, this friend of mine brought that pamphlet to mind. She was also a Unity student and a good friend of Margie's. And we used to go to these Zydeco dances, the three of us. And something was up in there. And she says, well, Bob, golden key that. I said, well, what do you mean? She says, well, stop thinking about that and think about God. And I think she gave me that pamphlet. So, but that's in essence, you know, stop thinking about the difficulty, think about spirit and bring it in there. You know, changing our thoughts is a powerful way to manifest our dreams. And, you know, what we think about in a moment, we can draw it into it. And if it's the negative stuff, we can draw the negative. And if it's positive, we can draw the positive. Lowell Fillmore also written this. Now take your mind off the unpleasant things and put your trust in God, like that. Giving thanks because he is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient in spite of all appearances, and you will find a solution. Magnify God in your mind instead of your magnifying negative ideas, and your problem will be solved. Doing this is about the most difficult thing a metaphysician has to do, yet it is the most necessary thing to do. Say, magnifying God. I remember this friend of mine talking about her magic magnifying mind. And that was the one that took the negative stuff and just magnifies it up. And here, you know, we can get to use that same magnifying mind and magnifying God in our work. And it, you know, it's not an easy thing to do when things are going to heck in a handbasket. You know, I plopped out the New York Times on the paper today and reading the headline and went, ooh, I could really run down the catastrophic road with this. I said, no, let me choose to see God active in our world and in the Ukraine and all over Europe and in the United States. So focusing on that. You know, in our invocation that we read this morning, the words of, you know, there's one presence, one power in the universe, the presence and power of God, which is absolute, unchanging good. You know, there's only one presence and there's absolute unchanging good in the world, regardless of appearances. So we may be thinking, well, what am I doing with my life? Am I doing my life's work? You know, sometimes it takes a better part of our life to figure out what we're supposed to be doing here. And I think the way we know if we're doing our life's work is how do we feel when we're doing it? Like this morning, you know, I gave Margie a big hug and I said, honey, thank you so much for inviting me to that Unity Church because I get to do this work. You know, had I not connected with Margie or invited her to my church and then she invited me to Unity, you know, we wouldn't be here. You know, I wouldn't know Phil Pearson and Dorothy Pearson, who are our neighbors in Lee Summit. And I get to talk with Phil Pearson a couple times a week, you know. And, you know, there's a good sign if, you know, kind of happy, you know, depressed or subject to some illnesses, and maybe because we're out of sync with our work, life's work. And, you know, we maybe remember a time when we did stuff and we liked doing it, or a time to change in our volunteer work and take a new class or do something. I remember when I first retired from the Coast Guard, you know, for 28 years, I used to be thinking, can't wait till retirement. And then boom, I get tossed into retirement. I go, well, what am I going to do? You know, I don't have to wear a blue shirt, blue pants, and a blue jacket and blue tie, you know. And so luckily, one of the things they did before retirement, they send you to this TAPS, Transition Assistance Program Seminar, TAPS, you know, TAPS at the end. And they had this book called What Color's Your Parachute? And one of the exercises that they had me do was look at all the jobs I had in the past and what were the good things that I liked about those jobs. And I took and put that in a big list, but the only thing I didn't have was a job title at the top. But I knew what I wanted to have in this job that I now had the time, energy, and money to kind of loaf around and do. You know, I had this 5-acre ranch in Modesto, and after about 6 months, I need to get off this ranch. It's killing me because I was doing all the work on it. And I looked at that list and I went, oh my God. And I started casting around and I found this job as a public defender investigator. I was kind of free to do the investigations. I wasn't stuck in an office. I could drive around. I had 8 people that were under me and I could direct. So, and I found, my goodness, that's it. Those things that I wanted in a job and now has a job title. So, if you're looking about what do you want to do in life, take a look at some of your past jobs, pick out all the good things, and those are the attributes. And then eventually, all right, Spirit, where's this thing that I'm supposed to be doing? It may be volunteer work. It may be doing other thing, maybe another paying career. Lowell had also written this: the higher you look, the farther you can see. You can see only a few feet when you look down. When you look straight ahead, you can see much further, sometimes several miles. The higher we seek our ideals, the further we shall see mentally. I remember when I was on this Coast Guard ship out in the North Atlantic and coming close to shore, the old-time sailors had a navigation method called bobbing the light. Bobbing the light. And if you looked on the charts, you could see the height of a lighthouse and how many feet it was, and also the number of miles at sea that you can actually see this light. Also, when you're on a ship, you're up high, you're above the water. So you take your height above height of eye, and the night and the lighthouse thing, combine those two distances, and when you start to see that light, if you kind of duck down and come back up, you knew that you were right at the end. Maybe it was 37 miles at sea to see the light, and 10 miles for you, and you're bobbing the light and you're blinking on and off. Oh my God, I'm 47 miles away from the shore. But, in the modern Coast Guard, we would say, let's put the radar beacon on it and we can measure it exactly. But, these guys had a way of measuring stuff and combining. I think that's combining our heights, combining the height of what we're looking at and combining our height as we look up. I came across a story of the Duke of Wellington, and every year he would invite his officers for a big banquet, and the officers that served on him at the Battle of Waterloo. And on this one particular banquet, the Duke had come across this beautiful jeweled box studded with diamonds, really worth a lot of money. And he was passing it around to his officers to look and admire and whatever. And towards the end of the dinner, the Duke was saying, hey guys, where's my jewel box? Well, they couldn't find it. They looked all over the tables, underneath the tables, and somebody suggested, well, everybody should be searched. And there's 2 people to object it. One officer said, no, I don't think that's appropriate. And the Duke, the Duke didn't feel it was appropriate to have his officers demeaned by being searched for this possible theft of a box. Well, several days later, he put on his dress coat again, or looked in the pocket, and what had happened was the box came around to him, and unthinkingly, he stuck it in his jacket pocket. And he was thinking, wow, what about that other officer that I had under command? Because the suspicion was on him. He didn't want to be searched. He probably took the jewel box. So the Duke searched around and found the officer. And this officer was living in a poor section of the city, and he was nurturing his sick wife. So the Duke shows up and said, why did you resist being searched? And he says, well, sir, I had taken part of my dinner and stuffed it into my jacket pocket because I was going to take it home and give it to my sick wife. So, the Duke, he, like Bobby the Light, he kind of stood up and looked, and he seen this officer in an entirely different light. Here he was under suspicion. He made a judgment that he may have taken it, but now it was vindicated. And he realized, this guy was taking care of his spouse by bringing the good food that he is providing at this banquet, bringing it home and taking care of his wife. So sometimes we need to resist making judgments. I came across, being a good unity minister and unity message, we have a Fillmore quote and we have a Bible story. And the Bible story that I came across was the story of, it's in the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verses 1 to 6. And it's about Lazarus. This is being sick. And Lazarus lived in a town called Bethany. He lived with his two sisters, Martha and Mary. And the sisters sent a note to Jesus saying, our brother is sick. Well, Jesus, he said that, he was not sick unto death, which turns out not to be true. But rather than jump right away, he waited 2 more days and then finally went to visit Lazarus and eventually raised him from the dead. So what if we look at the story metaphysically? Jesus represents that Christ in us. Martha and Mary are like those feeling natures of us. And Lazarus is a challenge that's kind of, got us down. So I think that one point of this is Jesus took his time. He didn't rush off to console Martha and Mary. He didn't. So when we have this challenge, we don't kind of rush off and smother our feelings. We take our time and go forward with this. And it's important to understand about the difference between inner guidance, opinions, and judgment. Inner guidance or intuition and opinions are important. Judgment, judge not lest ye be judged, because that intuition is that interior gut feeling about what should I be doing. Yeah. And my Margie sure helps me with that. And sometimes I'll be worried or concerned about what I'm doing. And she says, honey, what was your first thought? And usually that's your intuitive thought. And also having opinions allows us to focus with intention. And we get to move forward and correct itself. And, sometimes we just need to sit back and say, all right, what's up with this? Why am I bumping up against this challenge? Is there some anger? Is there some belief system I've got? Is there some blame that I'm making? Some fear, some habit? Ooh, that habit. Some resentment, some unforgiveness. Wow. I know somebody had mentioned St. Patrick's Day coming up this week. Well, also the Ides of March is coming up this week, the 15th, which was a Roman holiday, which was one for forgiveness of debts. So as we move through this week, if there's something that we need to forgive and change or whatever, maybe we can do that. And like that old Irish saying, give him a blessing, so whatever. Well, let's kind of wrap this all up together. And, we looked at stuff from this book by Lowell Fillmore about happiness to health, wealth, and happiness. And we talked about catastrophizing minds. We talked about going where we look. We talked about golden key things from the Emmett Fox book. We talked about our magic magnifying mind and how we can discover our life's work. And we reminded ourselves that as we look out further, we can see further. Like the old sailors bobbing the light, we can measure that distance and where we need to go. And a story about the Duke of Wellington looked up and saw a better side of his officers rather than one who absconded with his jewel box. And a little story from the Bible about Jesus. And the important point is Jesus took his time. So namaste, dear ones. Let's move into a period of meditative reflection. And I invite you to sit comfortably on your computer chair or whatever chair you have in front of your computer. You can close your eyes or let your vision be softly forward at these beautiful faces on our Hollywood Square computer screen. Bring our awareness to our body. Realize that we are here in the moment. Feel the pressure of our feet on the floor, the pressure of our body against the chair, the temperature of the air upon our exposed skin, and realize that we are here now in this wonderful little Zoom experience, a Sunday message from the Unity Spiritual Center of Napa Valley, our home church. Bring our awareness to our breath as we draw our next breath in. Feel that air flow up through our nasal passages, down through our trachea, into our lungs, and feel our chest expand as this wonderful life-giving air expands our chest area. And as we exhale, realize that our lungs are taking those unused or unneeded waste products from our blood and releasing them out into the atmosphere to be reused by other life processes. Like any plants or flowers we may have in our home, our exhale breath is being used by those to help them continue their life. Let's follow our next in-breath down into our chest and heart center area and let our attention stay focused in our heart center. Our heart, this wonderful physical organ that sends blood to every cell of our being. And if any part of our body temple needs that healing hand of spirit, I invite you to visualize love-filled, spirit-filled blood flowing into and around that part of our body temple that needs that healing hand of spirit, bathing it in a blue, white, light bubble of healing, spiritual energy, bringing about the right and perfect solution at the right and perfect time and in the right and perfect way. And if there's any person, place, thing, or event in our lives that need that healing hand of spirit, I invite you to see it very clearly in your mind's eye. And see that person, that place, that thing, that event that needs the healing hand of spirit, bathed in a blue, white light bubble of healing, spiritual energy, bringing about the right and perfect solution at the right and perfect time. And Jesus of Nazareth, when asked by his disciples, saying, Lord, teach us how to pray, he told them to go within to the closet of your being, shut the door to the outside world, and your Father, which hears in secret, speaks in a small, still voice, but rewards openly. So we've gone to the closet of our being, our heart center. We mentally shut the door to the outside world, and we listen for a few minutes here in the silence, and perhaps we'll hear some small, still voice, or thoughts flitting across our mind, or images flitting across the screen of our mind as we gently rest in the silence. And I'll ring this chime 3 times and move into our period of silence.
Lost my connection.
I think no one's talking.
You want to be able to hear, right?
I seem to be muted.
All right, in our period of quiet here, perhaps we had images flash across our mind, or thoughts flashing across our mind, or perhaps not. But we know the Spirit speaks in diverse ways and means, and perhaps later today, a conversation with a friend, a book we're reading, a movie we're watching, will be a message from Spirit of what we're doing. And as we get ready to sing our Alleluias, I'll ask Lon to come on in and